Will the Jetstream ever heal? I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, December 28th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. We'd be happy to respond. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Peter Carpenter, main account. Clay Goose, Tim Caston, Elliot Harris, B. Nadine, and East Slate. Thank you all so much. And with that, let's get to work. We'll start by taking a look at significant wave heights around the planet. Starting in the North Pacific, we have a gale with 28.8 foot seas. Those are the highest seas over the entire domain. Where is that? 83 south, I think it's right there. One little tiny area. And 13.5. Can't even find it. Okay, anyway, about 26 foot seas, aim south somewhat at Hawaii. Swell you can see is already in the water, heading that way towards the Hawaiian Islands. A little bit of lesser fetch in the 17 to maybe 20 foot range, pushing up into the Pacific Northwest, maybe sideband of energy eventually reaching into California. Southern Hemi pretty much asleep, 15, 16 foot seas of no interest. North Atlantic, much quieter pattern, 22 foot seas pushing into Finland, Sweden area, something like that, and 22 foot seas off the U.S. northeast coast, but not aimed back at the mainland at all. And then this other area of 26 foot, 27 foot seas off of South America, aimed somewhat at South Africa, and then really nothing going on in the Indian Ocean. But first, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to look at the buoys. We're going to start up in the Pacific Northwest there, the border between Oregon and Washington, Grays Harbor, buoy number 036. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy all the way up from 33.3 second period energy, 0.0 feet, the whole way down to 5 second period, unrideable wind chop, and that's about 0.3 feet, and you just see not a whole lot going on. Here's the 2 foot level. There is nary a drop of energy at 2 feet in any period band, so pretty quiet conditions. Using an algorithm, put it all together, primary swell 1.8 feet at 7.9 seconds from 288 degrees. Let's see. Yeah, that's about right, somewhere in there. Okay, and that makes surf at about 1.5 foot. And then secondary swell, 0.6 of a foot from 12.1 seconds from 264 degrees, putting about 0.7 of a foot of energy underneath that somewhere. So all in all, very quiet. Down to Northern California, San Francisco, buoy 46026, the San Francisco buoy. Sort of the same pattern, but at least we have one period band that breaks the 2 foot mark. That's at 9.1 seconds, but still basically all wind swell. Primary swell 4.1 feet at 10.2 seconds from 319 degrees, making surf 4.2 feet and literally no secondary swell energy. Down south, Southern California, the Point Loma South buoy, number 191. They're off of San Diego. Same sort of pattern. Peak energy, 1.4 feet at 8.3 seconds. Put it all together, primary swell, 2.4 feet at 9.1 seconds from 274 degrees, making surf 2.2 feet with no secondary swell energy. So the quiet pattern continues. And then finally, the north shore of Oahu, the Waimea Bay buoy, number 106. Also a quiet pattern there, but energy, more energy between, let's say, like 10 to 13 second period range. Primary swell 2.5 feet at 12.3 seconds from 228 degrees, making surf 3.1 feet. And secondary swell 2.4 feet at 9.2 seconds from 258 degrees, putting secondary swell at about 2.3 feet. So pretty much across the East Pacific, a very quiet pattern continues. So let's take a look at what has been going on over the past week. We're looking at significant wave heights. We're starting in the North Pacific, and we're starting at the time of last week's video, 12Z on Sunday, the 21st of December. Just put this into motion, looking for anything that happened. Now, there was this gale that tried to blow up. Well, there's two, one off of California, one over the dateline. Both made a little bit. So here you go. You see that 24-foot seas aimed somewhat Hawaii. And then there was the gale off California that really tried to get going on Thursday, but it wasn't until basically Christmas Eve evening. Seas got to 29 feet right there at 39 north, 133 west. Aimed at the coast pretty well. And by Friday, that swell was pushing into the coast. There were some waves, but it was pretty south wind, lumpy mess. Then another gale, let's go back just a day or two here. On Friday, also another gale developed over the North Dateline region, falling south, producing 24, 25-foot seas, aimed kind of bypassing Hawaii, more out here towards the dateline. But then the gale started to shift off to the east on Saturday, the 27th of December, with 24, 25-foot seas again aimed at Hawaii. And continuing into this morning, seas up to 27 feet barely and 26 feet as of right now. You see the leading edge of the swell front pushing towards the Hawaiian Islands. Swell reasonably imminent, arrival expected along the coast there. For the Southern Hemi, going back a week ago there before Christmas, I mean, one would expect literally nothing going on. I'm looking for any seas greater than 25 feet. Oh, there we go. 27 feet over a tiny little area. This is on Saturday, the 27th of December, so yesterday. Lifting off to the northeast. I mean, I guess it's possible some 15-second energy could show up in Southern California about a week out. And there we are current time, but I'd say odds are very low, and it would be at best just like impulse energy. Over to the North Atlantic over the past week, you see residual seas in the 19 to 20-foot range. On Sunday, they were pushing into Portugal and Ireland, that area. Another little gale there south of Greenland, but it didn't really do a whole lot. You see bits and pieces of energy trying to push off. This has been the pattern. All low pressure, like right over eastern Canada, trying to push east. We're into Wednesday, Thursday. You get the sense everything lifting more to the north. We had that one giant swell that pushed into Ireland, a week ago or something like that. You saw the videos, I'm sure. Definitely solid, long period swell with good form. But now that pattern seems to have broken down. We are into current time, and really nothing other than, 18, 20-foot seas, a pretty good ways away from Europe. So no, and certainly nothing for the U.S. West Coast, U.S. East Coast, everything pushing off the coast there. To the South Atlantic, a week ago, into Monday, Tuesday, wow, really quiet indeed, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and here we are coming into Sunday, and little tiny gale with 28-foot seas, but a long ways away from Africa, and that is pretty much it. Quiet pattern this past week. And then finally, to the Indian Ocean, a week ago, we had a gale with 27-foot seas south of Australia. Another one with 28-foot seas over the mid-Indian Ocean. They both kind of petered out as we got into Monday, Tuesday. We're into Thursday, Friday. Little local gale south of southwestern Australia on Friday with 32-foot seas. That kind of faded out. I think whatever swell has been generated by that has already hit. And we're into current time and pretty quiet. Not unexpected given that it is summertime in the Southern Hemi. So, to the million-dollar question, the problem with the North Pacific, in case you haven't noticed, there has been literally nothing going on for several weeks now. The jet stream has just been horribly split apart, fragmented, incapable of forming gales or troughs. We'll get into that here. But the question is, will that pattern change? Because the jet stream has been split, it hasn't been capable of supporting gales. The good news is, we think that we're moving into a much better situation over the next week. We're going to start by looking at current conditions. Jetstream level winds up at about 30,000 feet. These winds help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south, like you get there, I guess, kind of. That helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, well, it starts circulating, generating winds. Those winds, if they're strong enough, get traction on the ocean surface, generating seas. Seas, as they propagate away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements decay away, exposing swell, and swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. All right. Now, the jet stream, well, here's the main flow pushing off Japan, winds at about 140 knots. It makes it not even to the date line. Half of it splits way off to the north, going even north of the Bering Sea. The other half falls due south down to the equator. The two tracks kind of come back together for, 600 miles north of Hawaii. Then they split yet again. And then you have this big backdoor trough that's off of Point Conception and then coming back in over San Diego, I guess. But in all this, you don't see winds even 140 knots, and we really want to see them up at 160 or 170. So all in all, this giant split wavy pattern just does nothing to support gale formation. Let's put this into motion, see where we're at. So we get into Monday. The northern split tries to heal, but then you see it starting to rebuild again. Same here. You got this big split over here. When you have a split like this, and clear air in between, and then you end up with high pressure. So high pressure there, high pressure there. This is all symptomatic of the inactive phase of the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. We'll get into that. But the short of it is there are these periods where the MJO, when it's active, that feeds energy to the jet stream pulses. When it's inactive, the jet stream just falls apart, and this is exactly what we're seeing right now. Tuesday, same sort of deal. Notice wind energy trying to build over Japan and off Japan at 160 knots, but it really needs to go further. But then we get into about Friday. Now, this is a bit of a reach for the models, but all of a sudden we have 190 knot winds. Something is injecting energy into the jet stream. And the jet stream, this big split that was right here, you're getting a sense that, well, there you go. It's gone by Saturday, solid winds. Now it's lifting off to the north, nearly up to the Aleutians, but anything where it's consolidated is way better than where we've been. And you see the jet continue to be consolidated into Sunday, 162 to 174 and 180 hours out. I know, never believe a model out 180 hours, but at least you see a consolidated flow lifting up into the northern Gulf of Alaska. A little bit of a split here, but that's kind of typical, especially when it's this week, not really meaningful. And then I cheated and looked at the models going out 2 weeks, and they suggest the jet stream falling further south. This is typically the way this heel jet stream pattern sort of goes. It pushes, organizes, consolidates, pushes off to the northern Gulf, and then little bit at a time starts dropping further and further south. When it does that, it starts digging out troughs, etc., etc. Anyway, I'm just going to go back here real quick. You don't see any really meaningful troughs. There's some sort of trough out here on Friday, but again, wind energy at barely 90 knots. You're not going to get any significant circulation going on. Saturday, maybe a little bit better off of Northern California. And then you see, as we get into Sunday, a better, I'll call it a backdoor trough falling down the U.S. West Coast, offering some hope for gale production, but nothing too intense. And then, of course, with winds at 180 knots, you could get gale formation anywhere along here south of the Aleutians. So the short answer to this week's video question is, it looks like the jet stream is going to heal and that we're going to be in a much better place come next week's video. So let's go down to the ocean surface. It takes actual wind blowing on the ocean to make waves. The jet stream is more like the foundation of your house. It holds it all up. If it's in good shape, your house is in good shape. If it's a fragmented mess, then your house has leaks in the roof. All right, so here we are, Sunday, 18Z, 28th of December. A little bit of a gale over here in the west, off of Japan, Western Pacific, with 40-knot winds aimed to the south. Another little bit of a gale here south of the Eastern Aleutians with 35-knot winds. Both these targeting Hawaii well, but not really anything aimed at the U.S. West Coast. High pressure you see here in control. We know the Jetstream's split here, so no big surprise. We get into Monday. Gale winds up a little bit better off North Japan. 45-knot winds targeting Hawaii, while the gale in the northern Gulf starts to fall apart. Tuesday, both gales pretty much gone. Little bit of some sort of fetch trying to droop down into the northern Gulf at 30 knots. But that's good for maybe 10 or 11 second period wind swell. I don't know if that's really going to do anything for anyone. Thursday, Friday, there we go. 30-knot north to northwest winds, not targeting the U.S. West Coast. Probably targeting sideband energy better towards Hawaii, but at least there is some motion in the atmosphere. That gale starts winding up Friday. We know the jet stream is getting better organized. In fact, it's tracking pretty much right along this path here, and you see that with more energy in the jet. Here comes a gale off of Japan, another something over the Eastern Aleutians, and then the system off the U.S. West Coast as we get into Saturday. Go right to 12Z, 40-knot winds aimed at Northern California. Sure, bunch of fetch and probably rain, but whatever. You take what you can get. Here's a better organized system, 50-knot winds setting up off of North Japan. Put this into motion. That gale starts lifting off to the northeast, 45-knot winds continuing into Sunday over the North Dateline region, late Sunday night into early Monday. Certainly swell could be produced by this. Sideband energy to Hawaii, a little bit more direct energy down into mainly locations north of Point Conception, if one is to believe the model a week out. What are the effects of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, we know we have a gale here south of the central Aleutians, producing seas 26.9 feet, targeting Hawaii reasonably well, I guess. I'll give it that. And that fetch and those seas falling south into Monday morning. 20-foot seas, pretty much gone by then. Energy aimed at the Hawaiian Islands. Another gale, in fact, let's go back just a little bit here, starts developing Monday morning with 27-foot seas, also aimed at the Hawaiian Islands, a little bit further away. Then rebuilding as we get into the evening on Monday, 25-foot seas, continuing into Tuesday morning at 23 feet, let's say, maybe 24 feet. So some sort of swell will be, so a double whammy swell, really. One from the north, one from the northwest, targeting the Hawaiian Islands. Nothing for the U.S. West Coast, but then we see energy starting to build as we get into Friday. 20-foot seas, not really aimed anywhere, but then we get into Saturday. Here we go, 20, 22, 24, maybe 25-foot seas, 25-foot, that's about it. But in close proximity to the coast, right off the Oregon-California border. Next gale starts building off Japan with 34-foot seas to 37 feet to 39 feet. We're on Sunday, and I think we have a couple more frames here. 38, 39, one more frame. 38 foot. So that's 38-foot seas. That's good for, yeah, probably 20-second period energy, maybe a hair bit more, but I'll say 20-second period energy. Now let's go take a look at this. How's it all aimed? It's all pushing off to the northeast. Most of that energy pretty far. The Great Circle path is like something like that relative to this fetch area. So most of it, I would say, is going to target this area here. Sideband energy down to here, and very much more sideband energy into the Hawaiian Islands. But at least there is something to hope for. To the South Pacific, given that it is the dead of summer down there, one would not expect anything of any interest to be developing. Yes, look at that. We do get an area of, is that 33-foot seas, all falling southeast, probably targeting Patagonia. Not even sure Peru would get into the mix on that. See if anything else pops up, but I would say the odds are incredibly low, and we see nothing after that. To the North Atlantic. Now, the North Atlantic pumped, we talked about that just a little bit ago, courtesy of the active phase of the MJO pushing from the equator, from west to east of the equator, just south of here. Okay, but that active phase of the MJO, I think, has exited the Atlantic now, just by looking at the Jetstream charts, and we'll see that here too. Just not a whole lot going on. We're looking for energy pushing towards Europe or towards the U.S. East Coast for that matter, but we're not seeing it. We're into Thursday, Friday, a little bit of a gale here off of, I guess it's targeting Morocco, 20-foot seas, 21 or 2-foot seas. And then a little bit of something here pushing south off of Northern Ireland, 21-foot seas on Saturday, the 3rd of January. See what anything else? Another little pulse of energy as well, and also targeting very north-angled swell for Portugal. This would be into almost Monday, the 5th of January. So Europe not completely out of the mix, so definitely a more muted pattern. U.S. East Coast, pretty quiet. To the South Atlantic, we do have that little gale there off of South America, and it is forecast to actually make a pretty good track into Tuesday with, what was it, about 24, 25-foot seas, 27-foot seas. So certainly some swell could end up here for western coast of South Africa. From that, you see the swell front radiating away from it. Nothing huge, but possible. And then moving on, we're looking for anything else. I mean, given the time of year. Oh, hey, 31-foot seas building to 32 feet to 31 feet. So possible swell. Again, this is almost a week out, but there is some hope for South Africa. Given the time of year, anything is a gift. And then finally, the Indian Ocean. Again, not expecting a whole lot, but hey, there we go. A little bit of a gale, 34-foot seas expected on Monday, tracking off to the east, providing swell likely for Mentawais, Indonesia, down to Western Australia. Nothing huge, but it's possible. You see the swell front impacting there. We're into Thursday. Looking for any other possible fetch. Another gale develops with 25-foot seas on Sunday, building to 27 feet. We're a week out. Yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in this, but who knows? Maybe some swell to result. Take what you can get. The local wind forecast for California here and Hawaii here. There's the Hawaiian Islands. Baja, there's the border right there. Southern California, Point Conception, Monterey Bay, San Francisco Bay, the Oregon-California border, and on up here. Well, there's your high pressure ridging inland. It looks like northwest winds on Sunday. It could actually, well, as we get more into Monday, we'll just go there. The pattern turns as the high pushes further in. Winds circulate clockwise around high pressure. You end up with an offshore flow for all of California. Southeast trades 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Into Tuesday, offshore flow for California. Trades east-southeast at like 10 to 15 knots. Get into Wednesday, same sort of, well, actually, let's go back. You see this, I'll call it a cutoff low developing south. That is what? About 700 nautical miles southwest of Point Conception. Clockwise or counterclockwise circulation around that, and as that builds as we get into Wednesday, all of a sudden you see, well, it'd be an offshore flow for Southern California, maybe more of a southeasterly flow for Central California, and slack winds for Northern California. Trades 10 to 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. As we get into Thursday, that low, actually, let's see where it goes. It lifts north and gets assimilated into this building low off the California coast. Some sort of a south wind flow starts building at 15 to 20 knots, where trades continue at 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. By Friday, full-on wrapping up low, right back to where we were. Similar to Christmas, maybe not as cold though, but south winds from Point Conception on northward. Trades 15 plus knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Saturday, same sort of deal. I mean, this looks like a carbon copy of what happened over Christmas. Northwest winds 40 knots aimed at the coast. South, it shows like southwest, but really when it gets into the coast, it's more like south-southwest kind of thing, which is still an onshore flow from Point Conception northward. Trades 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. High pressure builds north of the Hawaiian Islands. Saturday into Sunday, that low fades out, but another low, it looks like, is setting up in the Gulf of Alaska. A much lighter south wind flow, but still south winds. Trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. And out 180 hours, here we go again. More south winds, precipitation. We'll take whatever we can get. South winds down to Point Conception. Trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Precipitation forecast for California. Remember, we are in some flavor of La Nina. Every drop of rain counts. Take it any way you can get it. Right now, you see high pressure pushing into the Great Basin. That sets up your offshore flow for California, blocking high pressure. The blues are rain, but here comes that cutoff flow to the south here on Tuesday into Wednesday. And this one, as we get into Wednesday evenings, rain for Southern California, building to the north. Rain for Central California, up into Northern California, mainly limited along the coast. You can barely see a touch of gray there. That'd be like sleet for the Southern Sierra or the highest elevations of this Sierra on early Thursday. And then a more pronounced snow-like pattern. Again, this just eyeballing it and seeing how it's a southerly flow and not like a low falling from the north. This would be very warm temperatures and probably mainly rain in the Sierra, except for the highest peaks. We're into Thursday. By Friday, that system starts petering out, but then here comes a new, more of a cold core looking low on Friday, pushes into the coast, and boom, then you see legitimate snow over the Sierra. Friday night, pretty heavy snow late Friday night into Saturday morning over the entire Sierra, working its way south, the rain down into Southern California. That continues through the day Saturday, and then a lighter event continuing on to Sunday where it's probably clear along the coast. When you see this, is more like scattered showers at best. And then you see another low building, continued snow up into Tahoe Sunday night, and that's the end of the model. But you can just see that if that happens, it's going to push onshore and make yet more snow. So all in all, we're doing pretty well. In fact, in my rain gauge, I've got officially 9.5 inches at the house, and normally for a year we get like 21 or 22 inches of rain. So we're at just roughly 45% of normal, and winter started officially on December 21st, so not too bad. And here is the snow forecast dashboard for Palisades, Tahoe, Olympic Valley, formerly Squaw Valley. This is a dramatic improvement from 24 hours ago when I did the manual forecast. It was like 6 inches or a foot. And now in 24 hours, we're talking 65 inches, something like that, 64 inches with an event the second and the third, dribbles into the fourth, and then you get into the fifth, yet more snow. Not too bad. Let's go look at Mammoth. Mammoth with 49 inches. Mainly, I think, the difference between the two is that second snow event for Tahoe, because it's coming more out of the north, favors it. Mammoth, too far south. Now, this goes out 10 days, so this captures even the full extent of the second event. So it's just going to get wrung out going over Tahoe, and by the time it gets down to Mammoth, not as much energy. Now back to Palisades, Tahoe for the snow level. All right, this is a chart. The reds, wherever there is red, if there is precipitation, it would be liquid precipitation. The grays would be sleet, so this is like 37 to 32 degrees. The white, the border of the gray and the white is the 32-degree freeze line. And then where the blue starts, that's 28 degrees. That is actually what I consider good snow, not like really wet snow, but a much drier snow. The black line here, this is elevation from 0 feet up to 14,000 feet in elevation. Palisades, Tahoe at 6,200 feet, the base elevation. The summit's up at the top of the Palisades, and Granite Chief Peak is about 9,000 or 8,900 feet. So you see, if there were any precipitation in this region, it would all be liquid precipitation. You see here January 1st. These charts are pretty much lined up. So you see a little bit of snow forecast in here on the 1st, but the snow level is up at 8,500 feet. That's above 90% of the runs at Palisades Tahoe. But then as you get into January 2nd, snow level falls to about 7,000 feet. So that's the entire upper mountain and good hefty amounts of snow. And then as you get beyond that, the freeze level comes down to 5,000 feet or less. And whatever precipitation you get out in here, then that would be really good quality snow. The surf spot forecast will start in the Pacific Northwest, Columbia River there. Again, the intersection of Oregon and the Washington border. Surf heights, 6.5 feet on Monday into 7.5 feet on Tuesday. Some sort of an offshore flow, 10 knots, pretty much the whole time period. 5-foot surf into Wednesday, Thursday, settling down on Friday, then back into the 5-foot. And then when you start seeing all this jumping around, that means a lot of wind. And sure enough, here you go. South winds, 35 knots, 40 knots. So hard to, probably not a whole lot of great rideable surf. Swell heights, 5 feet at 12 seconds, 6 feet at 13 seconds, 4.5 feet at 11 seconds on Wednesday, Thursday, 4.5 at 11 seconds. Then things start turning into pure wind swell, 11 feet at 9 seconds, 10 feet at 9 seconds. You get the idea. Down to Ocean Beach, San Francisco now. Again, not a whole lot aimed at Northern California, so one would expect rather small surf heights. Let's get into Monday, 2.5 feet. Yep, 3.5 feet on Wednesday, and maybe 4 feet on Thursday. Winds all offshore, and then we start with the south wind on Thursday, building to 30 knots on Friday. No real surf, building into Saturday. And then theoretically, surf heights 14 feet on Sunday, with southwest winds, right, the lows right there up along the coast. In fact, let's just go look at it. All right, so swell heights, Monday, 3 feet at 8.5 seconds. I mean, that's like, what I'd expect to see in July or something with no southern hemiswell. 3 feet at 12 to 13 seconds on Wednesday. Okay, so some sideband swell sneaking in. Same thing into Thursday, Friday, everything kind of drops off. And then you get into Sunday, 10 to 11 feet at 13 seconds, local gale off the coast. And I think we had not a horrible south wind flow during that. So maybe some hope. To San Diego, Southern California. I mean, look at this, 0.3 of a foot. So no surf Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. What is this? 3 feet dropping to 1 foot. I'd say that's all pretty much nothing either. But then you get into Saturday, Sunday. Surf heights up to 5 feet, something like that, with some sort of a light northwesterly flow. Swell heights, 0.5 foot at 7 seconds. Oh boy. 0.6 feet at 13 seconds. Okay, really just nothing going on till you get into the weekend. 4 feet at 12 seconds. So something rideable. Over to the Hawaiian Islands, north shore of Oahu. They are much more better positioned to capture swell. We see building swell on Monday to, I'll say, 8 feet, something like that. Then in the 8.5 foot range Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe up to 10 feet as more swell builds in, continuing Thursday, then dropping out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but still in the 4 to 5 foot, if not better range. Trades the whole way through at 10 to 15 knots, maybe a little bit more. Swell heights. Building on Monday, what do we say? 6.5 feet at 14 seconds. Tuesday, 6.5 feet at 13 seconds. Wednesday, 6.5 feet at 12 seconds early, fading more on Thursday. Then beyond that, in the 3 to 4 foot range at 12 to maybe 12.5 seconds. So continual surf, but nothing particularly huge except for, what day was that? Somewhere in here on Wednesday, and even then not huge, but just solid. Going over to Ireland, just a generic spot along the coast. Surf heights, pretty much not really an issue. A little bit of some sort of something trying to sneak in on Thursday or Friday. This would be about noontime on Friday, local time. And then, again, just wind and not a whole lot going on. Let's take a look at swell sizes. 8.5 feet at 13 seconds. And this is all 2.5 at 12 seconds sort of thing. And then beyond that, rather small, 1.5 at 12 seconds. So nothing too eye-catching. Central Portugal, surf heights in the 4-foot range on Tuesday, fading out on Wednesday. Maybe a little bump there on later Thursday, nothing on Friday. And then Sunday, 10-foot surf for a little window. What do we got for winds then? North at 25 knots, so that's not great. So let's take a look at swell heights. 10 feet at 11 seconds, so pretty much all wind swell. All right, let's go take a look long term, and we're going to inspect or examine the two major weather oscillations that affect our surf long term. That is the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We're going to start by looking at trade winds across the Equatorial Pacific, and specifically in regards to the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to the MJO, active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is on one side of the planet, the inactive phase is on the other. They rotate around the planet west to east, and the active phase is our friend. It is like a low pressure, well, it is a low pressure system. Because it's a low pressure system, it takes warm, moist air at the ocean's surface, lifts that aloft, that warm, moist air, gets sucked up into the jet stream, making the jet stream stronger, giving it more energy. With more energy, it ceases to split. It gets strong. It gets consolidated, pushing across the Pacific, more capable of digging out troughs and therefore supporting storms and surf production. The inactive phase of the MJO, exact opposite. It's a high pressure system. It produces falling air. That falling air steals energy from the jet stream. The jet stream gets weak fragments, exactly like what we've been going through for the past couple of weeks. All right. The other thing is in regards to trades. The active phase of the MJO being a low pressure system, trades being generated by high pressure. When the active phase is pushing across, let's see, from your perspective, it'd be from west to east, it cuts out the high pressure system, making trades much weaker. Okay, and that is good for, it allows warm water that's being held in the far west Pacific to start sloshing off to the east. The inactive phase of the MJO, because it's a high pressure system, it marries up or pairs up with the normal high pressure systems in the North and South Pacific that generate trades, making them stronger, and you get stronger than normal trades. So, given all that, we have data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the Pacific, East Pacific there, West Pacific here, that's New Guinea, the equator right there, dateline right there. We're just looking at the arrows, and the arrows are average wind speeds, trade wind speeds. So the longer the arrow, the stronger the wind. So reasonably strong trades in the East Pacific, same thing over the Central Pacific, same thing over the West Pacific. But it is not the actual wind speeds that matter as much. It's the wind speeds relative to this time of year. So they call it anomalies. Are the trades stronger or weaker than normal for this time of year? You look at the arrows here. Well, I actually got one kind of going backwards. So I'd say neutral to maybe slightly weaker than normal trades in the East Pacific. A little bit, probably almost neutral trades in the Central Pacific, but in the West Pacific, these are stronger than normal trades. Now, this is a 5-day mean, so it's really what happened about 2.5 days ago. It's not what's happening right now, but it gives you a good idea. This all generally suggests inactive phase of the MJO, or at least what appears to be the symptoms of the inactive phase of the MJO over the West Pacific. Let's go look at the forecast going out 2 weeks. 850 millibars, zonal wind anomalies. Again, that's just are the trades stronger than normal or weaker than normal? Blues, stronger than normal trades. Reds, weaker than normal, if not reverse trade winds, right? So this is the past 2 weeks up here. Or the past month, I'm sorry. And down here is the forecast for the next 2 weeks. But this is over the whole planet, so we need to isolate the Pacific, and specifically the West Pacific. It is in the far West Pacific where if you have the active phase of the MJO and it starts doing that lifting warm, moist air aloft, that feeds the jet stream, making the jet stream stronger and giving it momentum as it comes from, let's see, from your perspective, from the west to the east. It gives it momentum and helps consolidate it and make it stronger as it pushes across the North Pacific. All right, so here we go. We see westerly, and dateline is right here. Far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so right there. So it looked like we had the active phase of the MJO with westerly anomalies reaching across the dateline in the early part of December. And then as we got deeper into December, the trades or the westerly anomalies receded and they were effectively out of the Kelvin wave generation area, the Far West Pacific, as we got to the 21st of December, let's say. And from then on, east anomalies, and I would say this is probably the inactive phase of the MJO, has held and is forecast to continue to hold over the West Pacific into about the 7th of January. And then you see westerly anomalies trying to creep in, though you still have this pretty strong active or inactive MJO signal right on the dateline. Let's go look a little bit further out. Outgoing long-wave radiation forecasts. Fancy words for cloud cover. Active phase of the MJO takes warm, moist air, lifts it aloft. It eventually hits the upper atmosphere where it's much colder. It condenses and forms more clouds than normal. That would be blue. Negative anomalies. Sunlight can't reflect off the ocean surface because there's more clouds there. So the blue is the active phase of the MJO. The yellows and oranges, the inactive phase of the MJO. Now, this is from the statistic model. And again, South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, the equator right there, dateline right there. So in a very weak inactive phase of the MJO over the West Pacific. This is actually yesterday, the 27th of December. Building some over the dateline 5 days from now, holding 10 days from now, holding 15 days from now, while the active phase of the MJO builds over the maritime continent and starts seeping into the far West Pacific 2 weeks from now. Now, the dynamic model, what's it telling us? Pretty much the same thing, but the active phase not making as much foray into the West Pacific 2 weeks from now. Phase diagrams, the details for the same two models, statistic model, dynamic model here. How do you read this? Well, this paints a picture of where the active phase of the MJO has been and where it's going. The MJO moves from west-east, from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. So here is, November 18th? Where the active phase has been. The further the active phase is out from the circle, the stronger it is. So you see our reasonably strong active phase in the latter part of November, and then into December over the East Pacific, and then collapsing as we got to like the 4th or the 5th, and it just noodling around there. And the forecast has it very weak inside the circle of death over the Indian Ocean, and forecast, I'll say, over the maritime continent, still incredibly weak 2 weeks from now. Dynamic model, basically saying the same thing, but maybe the active phase not even making it to the maritime continent, just sort of noodling around somewhere between, I'll say, the East Indian Ocean. Then we go to the CFS model, going out a month. It's a dynamic model. Again, blues easterly anomalies, reds westerly anomalies. The MJO is actually painted on here, the black contour. If it's dotted, that's an inactive phase. So here you see a classic inactive phase producing the blues easterly anomalies. Here comes an inactive phase. An active phase, with westerly anomalies. But notice all this is pretty weak. One condor is not a significant active phase. But anyway, here is our last active phase there in November. Here's the current inactive phase over, the West Pacific starts at 125 east, so right around there. So you see the inactive phase started about the 13th of December and is continuing, forecast to hold for about another 2 days or something like that. And then the easterly anomalies associated with it start jogging to the east, still filling over 50% of the Kelvin wave generation area from 150 east to, and we have the active phase trying to push in, barely making it, Now, let's say starting about the 3rd of January, continuing into maybe the 15th of January, and westerly anomalies holding there. So the consolidation of the Jetstream that we saw on the earlier charts, I think is going to be attributable to this. The question is, how strong is this? Some of the models aren't even showing this, so it's a bit of a reach, I think, but we'll see. Any sort of westerly anomalies moving into the West Pacific would be better than where we're at right at this moment. And then finally, the CFS model going out 3 months, past performance down here, the forecast out here. Anything we're looking for, the yellows, westerly anomalies, the blues, easterly anomalies. Again, this is past performance. You see in November, here was our last active phase of the MJO, producing westerly anomalies that made it to about the date line, maybe even a little bit further. Then easterly anomalies come in, set up. Now, this model suggests easterly anomalies, for the most part, are going to be significantly gone in the next 5 days and move more to the date line and points east of there, with westerly anomalies building in, westerly anomalies to neutral anomalies, almost reaching, well, let's see, that's roughly 170, almost to the date line. And then it's not till we get into February that westerly anomalies really take over the bulk of the North Pacific. Now, if you recall, this model months ago said somewhere in, I think it was December or even November, that westerly anomalies were going to fully take over the North Pacific. No doubt about it. Well, you see that has not happened. Instead, we have this far more lackadaisical pattern. Again, you say, why? Why is this doing this? Why can't we get a real legitimate kind of winter setting up? Well, the winter before last was La Nina. It's not unexpected that we get some flavor of La Nina this winter. But then we start talking about the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which has been cold negative for 25 plus years now. Not unexpected. And I think, and I'm going to also put some blame on the Hunga Tonga volcano and the amount of ash that it dumped, or aerosols in the upper atmosphere, and I think that cooled the planet too. So we'll just have to see. We're waiting for a change of events. Anyway, so let's go take a look at overlay the MJO. Sure enough, here's our inactive MJO, dotted contour, forecast holding over the West Pacific for about the next week, and then moving into over the date line and regions east of there beyond as a very weak active phase builds in behind it. Again, westerly anomalies by the 5th of January should be taking over the far West Pacific and then reaching the date line somewhere around the 17th or 18th of January, and then pushing east beyond that. We'll see. All this, again, I don't trust a model a week out, much less 4 or 5 weeks or a month. But, and the low-pass filter. Let's see. Again, this is, again, a slide. This dotted contour here, the high-pressure bias, it was supposed to be moving out as we got into the end of January. Now the model has it forecast holding into the first week of February and then starting to ease off to the east. This is your La Nina indicator. So this is basically saying we're in La Nina in some flavor is in control, but it should be fading shortly. The solid contour here, the El Nino indicator, the low pressure bias, that is low pressure moving into the West Pacific. According to this, it's right at where it's been, about halfway into the Kelvin wave generation area, maybe back slipping a little bit into the 6th of February, but after that starts moving solidly off to the east. But this model has been teasing that for 2 or 3 months now, and it has not happened. I didn't show this earlier, but I should have. 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies just over the past 5 days. South America, Central America, New Guinea, 0 is the equator, dateline right there. The reds, westerly anomalies, the blue, easterly anomalies, but it's only 5 degrees north and south of the equator over a very thin area right here. So on the 22nd of December, you see easterly anomalies here building on the equator. This is all associated with low pressure up in the northern reaches, not germane to this discussion. Easterly anomalies building on the 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 26th. Clearly, this smells of an inactive phase of the MJO here. And it smells like the active phase. You see westerly anomalies along the equator over the Atlantic and into the far west Indian Ocean. So we have a ways to go. These blue anomalies have to push the whole way across the Pacific, which takes about 4 to 5 weeks before you can then get westerly anomalies solidly building off to the west. Subsurface temperature profile down on the ocean, down 100, 200, 300 meters. This is from the TAO data, TAO buoy array, that series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. These are the anchor lines on those buoys. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. X's are sensors on those anchor lines. You use the sensors plus models to fill in the gaps, and you get a profile where the warm and cold water is. Why does that matter? Stronger than normal trades take warm water that'd be like off of Ecuador here, push it all off to the west towards New Guinea in that area. And that's clearly what we see here. These are just basic temperatures. Now, it is interesting, though. That said, we do see one tiny little isobar here of, what is that, the 30-degree isotherm, 30 degrees centigrade. That's very warm water. 29-degree isotherm at 175. I think it was at 172 east last week. So it has ventured off to the east a little bit. The 28-degree isotherm, I think it was 179 last week. It's about 177.5 this week, so no big change. 24-degree isotherm, it was off at 130. It's easing off. So this generally suggests perhaps trades are lightening, but keep in mind, inactive phase of the MJO is still developing over the Pacific. All right, and this reflects it even better, the anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. The thermocline, that's what really matters, down at about 150 meters down. Look at this, warm water, 3 degrees above normal, definitely pushing off to the east. This finger here going to, I think that's, 135, maybe even 133. And there were 2-degree anomalies that were filling this entire area. I think last week, they've completely collapsed. This suggests the active phase of the MJO in November has produced something that's sort of like a Kelvin wave, but it's not really a Kelvin wave, but warm water trying to push off to the east, trying to dislodge the cold water pattern. But we have the inactive phase of the MJO setting up. It's going to start likely increasing trades, and whatever gains we're making will probably get wiped out. GODAS information, this is enhanced by satellite data. We'll take a look at that, but it clearly shows that warm pool moving to 120, maybe 125 west, down at 150 meters, if not even further than that, maybe 110 west, okay? And cool water becoming more and more isolated. This is actually looking great. There's a good amount of momentum here. This is the battle between the active and the inactive phase of the MJO. When the active phase of the MJO is stronger and consistently, that helps usher in El Nino. When the inactive phase is stronger consistently, then trades are stronger, and that helps usher in or support La Nina. This, if you just looked at this right now, I go, well, this certainly looks like the demise of La Nina. The question is, what is going to come and how much are we going to believe the models 2 to 3 months out from now? This is the effects of the active phase of the MJO in November. We have an inactive phase coming right now. We'll see how much that dampens these effects. Here is the satellite data. This shows you the sea level anomalies. Take out waves, wind waves, tides, and it's the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal. Why does that matter? Well, if you have cold water at depth contracts, and if it does, it'll make a divot on the ocean surface, and then you get negative anomalies. If you have warmer than normal water at depth, it expands, pushes the ocean surface up a little bit. So here we go. There's the Galapagos. That's Ecuador, Central America right there, Hawaii there. The date line right there, the equator right there, New Guinea there. Negative anomalies, -5 centimeters, -15, -15. It only matters 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So you see positive anomalies here, and you actually see, compared to last week, a significant erosion of the cool anomalies moving. That erosion is building off to the east, suggesting warm water pushing off to the east. Again, indicative of that semi-Kelvin wave trying to make it across. In fact, how far does it make it here? Like 122 west, something like that. So this is all good. The real question again is, what's the current building inactive phase going to do? Is it going to wipe out all our gains, or will the active phase linger and be strong enough to sort of not get completely crushed and we retain some of the gains that we've made over the past month? Upper ocean heat anomalies over time. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Here's going back a year, January 2025. Last year's La Nina, our little bit of a neutral pattern that happened in May, June, and July. The new the new La Nina, not nearly as strong. You see 1, 2, maybe 3 pushes of it, but then we see active phases, 1, 2. Here's the current active phase, beating out anything so far this year, with warm anomalies making it to 125 west. But again, I expect to see these blues starting to encroach back down here in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. We'll have to see. So what's going on subsurface looks positive. What's going on the surface? This looks like classic La Nina, okay? 5 degrees north and south of the equator, cool anomalies, Nino 1.2 region right here, Nino 3.4, the official El Nino monitoring region here, just 5 degrees north and south of the equator, cooler anomalies in control, pretty much unchanged from last week. The trend for the past 7 days, cooling, warming, sort of a mixed bag. So in all, neither warming nor cooling, basically neutral, slight warming out on the date line, but nothing significant. The Nino 1.2 index trend, all right? Sea surface temperature trend, temperature 5 degrees north and south of the equator, right there by Ecuador and the Galapagos. Temperatures today, minus 1.109 degrees below normal. This is not corrected for anything, but it's you can see, it's been cool, and if anything, in the past 2 weeks, I'd say it's gone down a little bit. The official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 index, values minus 1.271 or 1.25 degrees below normal right here. I'd say, if anything, here the trend is heading downward as well. Can't kind of deny it. Some flavor of La Nina is happening at the surface, even though subsurface and west anomaly-wise, it looks like things are changing. It's what is happening on the surface that really matters. Cool water on the ocean surface does not support evaporation. If you don't have evaporation, then what you end up with is falling air, like that kind of falling, and that doesn't do anything. That supports high pressure, and that is sort of the La Nina pattern. So right now, nothing looking like El Nino or even the active phase of the MJO. Oh, and by the way, neutral is considered half a degree above to half a degree below. Weak La Nina is half a degree to 1 degree, so that's about where we were. Maybe now venturing into moderate, which is 1 to 1.5 degrees, but again, this is not corrected data. Sea surface temperature anomalies for the Nino 3.4 region right here, these are corrected. Back November, minus 0.7 of a degree, same mid-November, minus 0.8, minus 6, or minus 0.6, minus 0.5, you see it. Pretty much steady in about the, I'd say, if I was eyeballing this, minus 0.7 degrees. Corrected, that it would be weak La Nina. Outgoing long wave radiation anomalies. The reds and the oranges, La Nina, dry air, cloud-free skies. The blue, cloudy skies, the El Nino-ish like. Okay, now 180 is the date line. So here's last year's La Nina. Here's this year's La Nina. All of a sudden, it looks like it's building dramatically just in the past 2 weeks. Here is the El Nino signal that has been hanging right over the entrance to the far west Pacific, at least for the moment, fading. This is probably, again, attributed to the building inactive phase of the MJO. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? Again, we talked subsurface ocean. We talked surface ocean. Now we're going above. That is ultimately what matters. And we look at the difference in pressure between Tahiti and Darwin. That's called the Southern Oscillation Index. Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin over the maritime continent. When pressure is lower over Tahiti on average, the index goes negative. Well, today it's plus 9.19. You see it was negative. It's kind of been toggling around, but lately in the past week or so, more on the positive side than negative side. Then you go back and you see we had a pretty good run of negative here the rest of the month. So it seems like we were going from negative, which would be the active phase of the MJO, to the inactive phase. 30-day average takes some of the noise out of there. The value, 2.14 negative. Where were we a month ago? Plus 14. So we went from inactive to active, but again, this is a 30-day average, so it's really a look back about 15 days ago. So it's really showing you the negative stuff that was happening here. That starts creeping into the average here. And then finally, we go to the, can we do this? Yes, we can. The 90-day average plus 8.2, suggesting La Nina for sure. Where were we? 8.89 a month ago. So really, no change. Let's go look at a graph. So here's the 30-day average SOI graphed out. Currently, here's our active phase of the MJO in November. And even to date, still kind of lingering. You see we're below, we're still neutral. They say plus 7 to minus 7, but we're still at a minus 2 or something. Minus 1 point, I guess I could pull it over here. Minus 1.6. Okay, so you see it there. The upward surges here, 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 inactive phase of the MJO, like here. Now we're in the active phase. Again, 15-day delay on this, but still suggesting we're not in horrible shape. It all depends on what the current inactive phase of the MJO does to us over the next couple of weeks. A quick look at ocean currents. We're seeing what looks like a good onshore. Actually, look at that. There is kind of a westerly component all going on here over the East Pacific. In the West Pacific, though, oh, let's see, easterly? Yeah, that's trade winds for sure. Sorry, I got myself confused. Trade winds stronger than normal. It sets the water in motion. And that continues on to, well, now officially, you can't see it there, but that's 150 east. I think last week when we looked at this, it was actually over to almost here, almost the date line. So if anything, trades have built a little bit. They're making progress. Of course, we saw it on all the previous charts. Again, inactive phase of the MJO setting up on the ocean surface, affecting ocean currents. The forecast for sea surface temperature anomalies in the Nino 3.4 region from the CFS version 2 model. All right, so as we got into December, well, we pretty much did exactly what the model said is about 0.7 of a degree below normal. Again, La Nina, weak La Nina is 0.5 to 0.1. We're barely in there. Now, for January, we were supposed to be up at nearly 0.5, but about 3 days ago, the model goes, inactive phase of the MJO, easterly anomalies. I'm bumping my forecast down, holding at, let's say, 0.75 of a degree in January, and then heading upward from there. So the model now is kind of going, yeah, this inactive phase of the MJO is going to last longer than expected. We won't even be neutral, dead neutral, until we get into mid-April. By then, winter's over, and really no hope is expected from that. So I'm guessing the tone of this winter is pretty much what you're seeing. Yes, I think the Jetstream will heal. Well, in fact, let's talk about this a minute. So for right now, not a whole lot going on in the North Pacific or anywhere else for that matter. It appears that the inactive phase of the MJO is trying to set up over the West Pacific, but none of the models suggest it building particularly strong. And even more interesting, the GFS model, which tends to be pretty negative, suggests the Jetstream building stronger starting about 6 days from now and pushing its way across the Pacific, feeding the production of gales and maybe a improving storm pattern. So the Jetstream is not 100% linked to the MJO. There are other modes of variability in the tropical Pacific that can affect the Jetstream. I'll take it any way I can get it. It does appear that we're going to be moving into a better pattern if the models hold. So again, that's a week out. So we'll have to see on that. Longer term, though, it looks like some flavor of weak La Nina is going to persist in the ocean and the atmosphere pretty much through winter, and then maybe as we get to spring, things will moderate a little bit. So my hopes are not super high for any kind of a great winter. In fact, when I did the forecast, the long-term forecast months ago, on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being horrible and 10 being great, I pegged this winter at about a 3.5. We'll see if that works out. It might not even be that good. And that, I try to be optimistic, but, there's certain realities in life. And La Nina is not one of those that ever gets me excited for surf. And especially when you're hanging in the zone where it's really weak La Nina, no momentum in the atmosphere, not great for feeding the jet stream, not great for storm production. Long term, though, let's go take a look further out. I think as we get into next fall, we'll be in a much better place. The last remnants of La Nina long gone, and if nothing else, will be neutral. If anything, neutral may be pushing towards a weak El Nino, but that's definitely a reach, so I'm not going to bet any money on that right now. So that's our forecast for this week. If you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. I'd be happy to answer. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below. And with that, we're done for this week. Happy New Year. I hope you had a great Christmas. Happy holiday season. One more holiday to go, New Year, and then it's back to work and hopefully ski. At least there's some snow in the forecast. All right, let's do this again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks so much for watching.